This is 11 honors, and we just had our quiz. We're beginning our discussion of chapter 13 through 16 of Huck Finn. Do you have any comments, any questions about anything that happened?
Crazy book.
What?
Crazy book, I think.
Well, crazy meaning good crazy or bad crazy?
Yeah. Well, I'd say good. Probably more just for the interest part.
Well, that's good. It can be hard to follow with Jim talking. Sometimes Huck's hard to follow, but Jim particularly, I have trouble understanding Jim, but I think I've always been able to figure it out, yes.
Why were they trying to get to the Ohio River?
Great question. Look at number 3 on this sheet. So you can write it down, you get the answer. Anybody know the answer to that? All right, so the dilemma or the question, yeah.
Was it just so Jim could be free?
Yeah, can you explain how that, because remember we talked about why didn't he just why didn't he just sail across the Mississippi to Illinois? Illinois is a free state, Missouri is a slave state. So why didn't he do that? The answer is the runaway slave law would have allowed people in Illinois and even people from Missouri to hunt him down. So he was not free as long as he's in the so-called contiguous United States. You know what I mean by that?
Is that where Cairo was?
What? Cairo was in Illinois.
Cairo's a place.
In Illinois.
That's what I'm saying. Is that where Cairo was?
Yeah, the tip of Illinois. That's why they were looking for Illinois. I mean, that's why. But did you understand what I mean? You cannot be free if you're a slave in the United States at this time by being within the borders of the United States. You can't go to a slave or free state and expect to be saved. So Cairo marked the southern tip of Illinois where the Ohio River flows into the Mississippi River. Of course, which direction are both rivers flowing?
South, north?
South, yeah. So every river in the world flows north to south except the Nile River, which flows from south to north. Isn't that strange? I've never understood that, but anyway, so when they get to Cairo, they were going to shift, this is answer number 3, they're going to shift to the Ohio River. Now, the Ohio River is flowing south just like the Mississippi, so how do you get up a river that's flowing in the opposite direction you want to go?
Use a boat.
Well, what kind of boat?
Steam boat.
You have to use steam because the sailboats won't work. You can't row up a river. The river's useless except for guidance. So they were going to sell their canoe and raft, buy tickets on board a steamboat, and sail up the Ohio River. Now, I don't know where the Ohio River starts, but if they're going northeast, if they continue in that direction, where will they end up? Remember, they're not safe in the United States at this point. So where are they going to end up if they keep going northeast? Canada, which is, I think you may have mentioned that, it's got to be the answer. There's no other place to be safe. And of course his plan, you know what his plan was? Is to make money. I don't even know if this is in the section you read, but it's to make money to come back to the United States by himself and then by his family. So it's ridiculous that someone would have to buy yourself back or buy your wife back, but that's why Cairo is so important. And I don't remember yeah, you read that. What happened, and I'm just going to mark it off since we answered it. What happened to that plan? What happened to the plan? Why didn't none of the story takes place on the Ohio River. It never takes place in Canada. They never get on the Ohio and they never get to Canada. Why? Well, the story is really well plotted out. Right there at the end of chapter 16, we're kind of skipping around here, but at the end of chapter 16, what happens to separate, one of those questions, what happens to separate Huck and Jim? Like Huck ends up on he's checking out the coast trying to find Cairo, but he on the canoe gets separated from Jim on the raft. What happened?
I was just gonna say, I followed the Ohio River. It sort of merges at Pittsburgh from the Allegheny and
The Three Rivers.
Monongahela River.
Monongahela, yeah.
Yeah, that one.
So
Pretty much.
that's I should have thought of that. The Pittsburgh Pirates play in the Three Rivers Stadium right there on the Three Rivers. They come together. Eventually, you're gonna have to change rivers.
So the
and
Mongolavi rivers there?
Monongahela.
That was close.
All right, somebody tell me, why did they, I thought you had it, yeah.
It was fog.
Exactly. The reason they missed Cairo is because of the fog. And so they have to come up with a new plan, which they never really do. What's the irony of their situation now, that they've missed Cairo and they're now still sailing the Mississippi? What's the irony? Like the opposite, the very opposite of what they wanted to do is now coming true. Why did Jim run away?
To be free.
Right, but he had not been free for a long time. What event happened, or fear of an event happened, that inspired him to go now? Yeah. Right. He heard Ms. Watson talking about perhaps selling him down the river. You know what that means? You know the expression down the river means? Well, if you go down the Mississippi River far enough, where are you gonna end up? The deep south. That's where the big plantations are. That's where they have the hundreds of slaves per plantation. And it also meant he would be separated that much further away from his family. So in fear of that happening, he runs away. He wants to become free, earn money, come back, and buy his family back. But what's the irony now that they've missed Cairo? Where are they gonna end up sailing?
Back to this, the slave spot he was at,
Say that again?
back to the place he started.
No, won't go back to the place he started. Where was he afraid he would be sold?
Farther south.
And where are they sailing? Further south. So ironically, they are sailing in the very direction that Jim was trying to avoid. But that now they are sailing in that direction. So that's ironic. Let's start with number one. Do you know, again, write these down. I need something to keep your focus here, and I'll check these. Payne, who do Jim and Huck keep from being seen? It's not, that's wrong, I'm sorry. It's why or how do they keep from being seen on their trip down the river?
They travel at night.
They travel at night. Very good, simple answer. Why does Huck want to explore this wrecked steamboat and describe his answer? So anybody remember, why do they go? Maybe we'll go to Sarah. Why do they get on this wrecked steamboat? A dangerous thing to do. You remember why they got on it?
Wasn't it just like, were they looking for something?
Yes and no. Yeah, certainly that was part of it. They wanted to find, what do you think they would find on a wrecked steamboat? Money and valuable items and so forth. That's not untrue.
Blue's Clues.
But that is, you know what else motivated them to do it?
Adventure.
Exactly. Huck thought of Tom Sawyer. And Tom Sawyer was the kind of person, he said, who would have loved to get on a wrecked steamboat and look for treasure. And so that also motivated him. So that's number two. How about number four? Well, number four, how do Huck and the canoe lose each other? We answered that. So
Oh.
Walker, you don't have to do that, but do you remember?
That one?
Yeah.
It was the fog,
Right,
right?
so we did that one. Walker, Huck's conscience begins to trouble him for keeping a runaway slave, or helping a runaway slave to escape. What does Huck resolve to do?
Doesn't he resolve to not turn him in?
Well, yeah, but that's true, but what did he do before he resolved not to?
Not really remember.
He resolved to turn him in.
Wake you up for Skywalker.
So the question was, Ben, try to stay with us here. What was his argument for turning him in, and then he changed his mind and didn't turn him in? But what was his argument for turning him in? Why does he want to turn? Jim's never done anything wrong to him, been a good friend to him. What's his argument?
He felt bad for taking Miss Watson's possession.
Yeah. He feels bad about stealing somebody else's property. And of course, there's tremendous irony there. In my opinion, did Huck do the right thing by not turning him in? Yeah. But at the time, that was a terrible thing to do. Abolitionists were looked down on in slave states, people who wanted slaves to be free. So it's ironic that by our standards, and I would argue, and I think you would too, by anybody's standards, slavery is awful. And yet at the time, it wasn't considered by a good number of people, it wasn't considered awful. So, but he does the right thing anyway, because he doesn't turn him in. Do you remember why he doesn't turn him in? It's number 6, yeah.
Because Jim thanked Huck for being such a nice man to him.
That's right. As he was sailing, not unknown to Jim, Huck was going to turn him in. Jim was there complimenting, boy, there's my buddy Huck. I couldn't have been here without Huck. You couldn't find a nicer guy than Huck. And he kept hearing that, and he realized, man, I can't do that. I can't turn him in. We'll go to, we've done 5, we've done 6. Oh, it's kind of also ironic. How does Huck console him for his failure to turn Jim in? After he doesn't turn him in, he'd already concluded that to not turn him in would have been terrible. And now he's doing this terrible thing by not turning Jim in. How does he make himself feel better? You remember that? It would take some very careful reading to pick up on that. He says, this is the dilemma. He says, if I do the right thing by turning him in, I'll feel terrible. If I do the wrong thing by not turning him in, I'll feel terrible too. But I'll feel good in a sense and terrible too. So if I'm going to feel terrible either way, then I'll just do what's most convenient. The easiest thing to do is not to turn him in. It's just really interesting how he thinks he does the right thing for the wrong reason, is what it turns out. He doesn't turn him in, but it's like, I'm going to feel bad either way. If I turn him in, I'm going to feel bad. If I don't turn him in, I'll feel bad. What's the easiest thing to do here? Just not turn him in. That's what I'll do. Anyway, we did number 7. Although we didn't answer the second part, what new plan do they make? And how is this plan frustrated? So they've sailed past Cairo. They're going in the wrong direction fast. What do they decide to do? They can't go south, which is the direction they're headed. So do you know what their plan was?
To get on a steamboat.
Well, I think that's really part of it. They were going to walk, at least hike, back up to try to find Cairo, and in order to get on a steamboat. But this plan was interrupted by what?
Did they pass it?
They did, but their new plan was to turn around. They can't turn around on the river, but so what causes them now to even desert this plan?
Steamboat,
Tell me about it.
like runs them over.
Exactly.
And they almost drowned.
Yeah, the steamboat runs right over them, and they get separated again. That's also an example of the dangers of the Mississippi River. One of the things I want you to keep in mind throughout the book is, what does the Mississippi River symbolize? And one of the things it symbolizes is freedom, right? Because it's their avenue to freedom, but it also symbolizes and is a source of danger. And one of the dangers is the one what happened? The fog was a dangerous thing, and a riverboat that looked like on purpose tried to run them over was also a dangerous thing. So that's 7. To what do Huck and Jim contribute all their bad luck? Yeah,
The snakes.
very good. Good answer that you would remember that. Remember, that was a superstition.
Is that Jordan?
All right, what final bad luck overtakes them? We already know that. Payne gave us that answer. Or Walker, they get run over by the steamboat. What happens to Huck? And this was the last question on the quiz. What happens to Huck? He ends up on the land, and then what happens to him? Say it.
I just said near that log house.
What happens at the log house?
Didn't he get attacked by something?
By what?
Dog?
Yeah.
Is that the-
He gets attacked by dogs, and so that's where the chapter ends. We got a few more minutes. Some of these are more theme questions, so we just went over the content questions, like what happens, the plot questions. Look at number 10. The steamboat that Huck goes on, gets on, is called the Walter Scott. I don't know if you know what this is, but why might the name Walter Scott remind you of Tom Sawyer?
It's
Anybody know?
like it's like 2 first names.
Tom Sawyer and Sir Walter Scott. That's an interesting point. It's not, yeah, it's true.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, Walter Scott wrote romantic novels, and Tom loves romantic literature. And by romantic, we mean, in that case, adventure literature. So Walter Scott wrote adventure stories, and Tom Sawyer loved reading adventure stories. Do you remember little Tommy Barnes? We talked about that before Christmas, or maybe last week, I can't remember, but the little 5-year-old who said he was gonna tell his parents on the gang, and Tom had said if anybody betrays the gang, we'll kill him, but instead he gives him 5 cents, gives him a nickel. By the way, I was looking this up. I'm gonna have to double check that, but I looked up. I had a particular reason to. How much would $20? How much would it have been worth in 1946? And it was worth almost $300. If you could buy $300, of our stuff by a $20 bill in 1946. Now everything costs different, and it's an inexact thing, but when you say a nickel, that sounds like nothing. We don't even have nickels anymore, do we? And yet, in 1850, a nickel was fairly substantial. One last question. Trust me on this. I'm going to give you the answer. It's number 12. Oh, we didn't finish 11. It says, compare the way Tom Sawyer treated little Tommy Barnes for threatening to tell all the secrets of the gang with the way Bill and Jake deal with Jim Tucker for the same offense. It's listen up, it's ironic, but it's true. Bill and Jake were going to kill Jim Turner for doing the same thing that Tommy Barnes was threatened. And so it just shows you the difference between a romantic world, a play world, a world of kids, and the world of adults, which in this case we have. So we're down to number 12. You need to read 17, 18, 19 before Thursday, and we'll wait for the announcement. Don't leave.
All right.
And I need to be able to hear it.
Bye.